For the past few days, I've been hearing this buzzing sound. At first, I thought I'd become used to it and eventually stop hearing it entirely, but to me, it just started to become far more noxious over time. It transformed into something akin to a constant vibrating noise in the back of my head. It was difficult to focus on anything. It became so bad that I had trouble sleeping, and it was beyond me how my parents never noticed it. You know what they say though, you lose hearing with age, so I wasn't surprised when they gave me confused looks. Tyler, my neighbor, heard it though. I was relieved at that. I meant I wasn't going crazy. He's actually the one that brought it up when we were playing video games in my basement. With him at my side, I became determined to find the source of this noise. We searched my house first and placed our ears all over the walls. The buzzing sound never seemed to become stronger or weaker, so we went outside. My original thought was that something was wrong with the air conditioning unit. If I was right, then that would explain why the sound transferred throughout the entire house. Needless to say, my theory was wrong. We stood behind the therming unit with the gigantic fan spinning inside. The unit was vibrating, but that wasn't the sound we were looking for. However, we realized that the sound was louder outside than it had been in my room. Searching my backyard up and down, we came to stop at a wooden fence surrounding the yard. We placed our ears on the fence and exchanged a knowing stare. The sound was coming from beyond the fence. That was enough for the both of us. We climbed the fence and dropped easily to the other side. The air beyond my backyard was filled with untouched forest, and I'd been over the fence a few times when I accidentally kicked over a soccer ball or something, but not really enough to explore. My parents always complained that there was poison ivy everywhere, and there was. We did our best to skirt around it, creating a path without a problem. It was really bizarre though. All we could hear was this buzzing sound, nothing else. I mean, we could barely hear the leaves and sticks which crackled beneath our feet. But all of the sounds seemed absent. There were no birds chirping, which was the weirdest part for me. You'd be hard-pressed to find an area in the woods where there aren't birds constantly singing at each other. As we kept walking, the buzzing sound grew louder and eventually we couldn't see my fence anymore. We stopped several yards from a cluster of trees that had tumor-like growths. We just stood there, staring at it. Neither of us really knew what they were. They appeared like they were part of the tree, as if the bark had, bubbled out into these strange formations. Trees can actually develop deformed growths called whorls or something like that. Naturally though, we just wanted to poke at it. Both of us were too chicken to get any closer, so we grabbed rocks instead, and just started tossing them. Well, all it took was one. Tyler was a baseball player, and the rock collided with one of the growths, and upon contact, the growth exploded outwards, sending chunks flying. Not even seconds later, bees, thousands of bees, stormed out of the opening and formed into a thick, throbbing mass. Both of us screamed and ran. I've never ran faster in my entire life. The bees were hot on our heels, and we could feel our stingers plunging into our arms, my back, my legs, anywhere that they could swarm. I don't really remember hopping the fence or how I arrived in my front yard, but I must have been screaming bloody murder. I stripped down to my underwear, and my mom was spraying me and the persistent bees with the garden hose. The icy, pressurized water didn't hurt as bad as the stings of the welts that formed instantly. I was ushered into the kitchen, given a towel, and my mom began meticulously removing stingers with a pair of tweezers. She lost count how many she removed from my body, and I was only allowed to change into a dry pair of underwear since the stings needed to be iced. The swelling and welts had been unimaginable, and now I understand how people can die from bee stings. I was forced onto the couch with ice packs positioned all over my body. The majority of the stingers were on my back, so I had to lay on my stomach, which I must have passed out sometime later. I woke the next day in the same position. The ice packs had been removed, and my mom refused to let me change into comfortable clothing until she inspected all of the welts. Thankfully, the swelling had been reduced significantly since the previous day. Over a bowl of soup, I learned that my parents called an exterminator after the incident. Apparently, there have been bees angrily flying around our yard and some of the neighbors' yards. By that point, everyone on the street was hearing the enraged buzzing. The exterminator arrived and promptly followed the trail of chaotic bees back into the nest. The man actually told my parents that it had been the largest colony he had ever seen. He sprayed so many chemicals that he didn't want anyone near the area. Not that anyone actually wanted to go investigate for themselves. The whole situation made me feel like a complete idiot. How could we have been so stupid? My only consultation was that Tyler might have just suffered as bad as me with the bee stings. I brought this up to my parents and asked how bad his injuries were. My mother gave me this petrified expression that I'll never forget. There had been nobody behind me when I raced around the side of my house. She hadn't even been aware that Tyler had gone back there with me. I felt guilty, beyond guilty. For the next few days, the horrifying images of Tyler being swarmed consumed me. I swore that he had been right beside me. What made me feel worse was that the exterminator never saw anyone. If Tyler had fallen and been injured, the exterminator would have known because he had to search the entire area for nests and make sure that everything was sprayed with pesticides. About a week after the incident, Tyler was still missing. I decided to search the area for myself, but I wasn't going unprepared. I grabbed a can of my mother's hairspray along with the lighter from the kitchen. And then if any of these bees were still kicking, then I wanted protection. I hopped the fence and moved slowly throughout the forest, my right hand clenched tightly on this hairspray. The distance to the nest was much further than I remembered. I knew whenever I arrived though because I heard a thick crunch beneath my shoes. I glanced down and felt a shiver run through my body. The entire ground was layered with bee corpses. I couldn't even see the dirt or grass, and in some areas, bees were just piled on top of one another. I was on my last nerve when I approached the nest, trying my best to ignore the sickening crunches underfoot. I narrowed my eyes at the nest that we destroyed. When I rounded the tree, the rest of the nest became apparent, nearly 10 times larger. I cautiously nudged one of the nests, which crumbled and revealed a thick waxen honeycomb. The dead bees trapped inside of the nest oozed throughout the opening. It was enough to turn my stomach. I grumbled beneath my breath and began poking at the nest with full confidence, watching more of the pieces fall to the ground. That's when I heard the buzzing return. My heart skipped several beats. I nearly stumbled backwards and landed in the disgusting ruins of dead bees. I sprinted back several feet and raised the hairspray and lighter, watching the nest from all angles. These bees could appear from anywhere, and they must have formed their nests throughout the cluster of trees. It was possible that their nest extended into the ground as well, deep beneath the roots. I bit my lip and waited for the swarm to appear like last time, but they never did. Instead, an odd, disturbing sight took me by surprise, enough for me to lower my guard. I left the clearing filled with dead bees and stepped through several bushes, trying to confirm what I saw. My entire body quivered and I wanted to call out, but my voice failed me, though that might have saved my life. Not even 10 yards away from me was Tyler. He was just standing there, his back facing me, and something was wrong. His movements were off. His body was twitching involuntarily, and when he took a step, his posture was rigid, his arms were locked in janky positions. Despite the horrible feeling in my gut, I wanted to call out to him. My concerns transformed into fear. Tyler turned and lowered his head to the side of his neck, which seems like it was broken. I knew he knew I was there, yet he couldn't see me. His eyes were gone. 2 dark sockets stared back at me, with bees crawling out of them. Swirls layered his flesh, which had turned into gaping holes, and a viscous fluid was running down his chin. I was too scared to move. I only ran when Tyler began lumbering towards me, swaying back and forth, twitching. For a second time, I screamed and ran for the hills, trying to outrun the crashes coming from behind me. I scrambled over the fence and felt the wood scraping against my skin, but I didn't care. I pounded on my back door crazily, and slammed it shut once my mother let me inside. She didn't understand much of what I was saying, since I was hysterical, but she gathered that I found Tyler's body in the woods. By the time that the police arrived, they waited for me to calm down, so I could explain what I saw. It was a mess, and they must have thought I was nuts. They searched the area where I saw Tyler, but they didn't find him. They found his body yards upon yards further away by the creek. Tyler had been reclined on his knees, with his forehead against the ground, immobile and dead. I refused to ID him. I couldn't see those empty eye sockets again. When I recovered from the event, I wanted to know what happened. I'm merely a pathologist who performed Tyler's autopsy and practically begged for answers. I needed a logical explanation for what I saw. He explained that they were going through the routine procedure when they hit a minor roadblock. When they sliced Tyler open, dead bees poured out. His body had literally been bloated with bees. His eyes were missing, his jaw broken, completely unhinged. His teeth were all gone, along with his tongue, which was replaced with wax. The worst part was, his organs were gone. All that was left was the skeleton, muscle, tissues. All that was left was the skeleton, muscles, and tissues, which seemed to be the base for extreme amounts of honeycomb within his chest cavity. The pathologist's only theory was that the bees devoured his organs, but bees aren't carnivores. The only way that I can actually try to explain this is there's a scientific concept called microevolution, which is defined by an evolutionary change in a species or small group of organisms over a short period of time. It must have been triggered by the pesticides. It must have.